The AFC East is one of the most interesting divisions in the NFL. With 4 NFL teams that all have aspirations for big things in 2024, today let's go ahead and do our 2024 AFC East division preview. So as I mentioned, I said that this is the most unique division in the NFL, and the reason why I think that is that I think each team is a tad bit complicated. On the surface and just sort of surface value, you would think that each of these teams are easy to talk about, but to be honest with you guys, each team has their own unique thing going on that's a little bit complicated. So with that all being said, we're going to talk about each AFC East team for about 2 to 3 minutes individually, and then at the very end of the video, I'll give you guys a brief division preview of the entirety of the division. And real quick before I hop into the video, around 93% of you guys who watch my content are not subscribed, so if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe button because that helps me out a ton. But let's hop into the video. So as I mentioned, we're going to start off by talking about each individual team first, and we are going to begin with the Miami Dolphins. Now last year, the Miami Dolphins went 11-6 and almost won the division before they kind of fumbled it at the end of the year. The Miami Dolphins have one of the best offenses in the entire league, led by guys like Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa, which is the big topic of today because he just got paid. Tua Tagovailoa just signed a massive contract. His contract was 4 years, $212 million, with a ton of it being guaranteed, and I don't really know if I love the contract, but I kind of feel as if the Miami Dolphins were handcuffed to Tua, so I also kind of understand it. As I said earlier, however, this is one of the best offenses in the entire NFL, and I do predict I do predict that they will still be one of the better offenses out there next year. Running back wise, they have Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, and the newly acquired Jalen Wright. I'm very excited to see those 3 guys just absolutely run the piss out of the football. All 3 of those guys are track monsters that can probably all run 4.3, so that's going to be absolutely a nightmare for defenses to cover. And then your receivers are Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Odell Beckham, Braxton Berrios, Malik Washington, and some other studs. Odell Beckham is an interesting player for this system. I don't really know if he quite fits it, but I will say that he does give you a unique skill set in comparison to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I feel as if we don't have to go into too much detail on Tyreek or Jalen. We all know what they bring to the table. Hopefully Jalen Waddle can have a healthy bounce back season from last year because I don't think it was his best year. Offensive line wise, you did lose a couple main pieces along the offensive line, mainly guys like Robert Jones. However, I still believe this offensive line is still good enough. I don't think it's a strong suit for this offense, but I don't think it's also a complete liability. As long as you can stay healthy, I still feel as if the O-line should be fine. Not to mention you do have a young guy in Patrick Paul, who I am kind of rooting for to be a decent player. Defensively speaking, they were absolutely annihilated by injuries last year, but they brought in a couple new backups to kind of fill out each position. In terms of the defensive line, I still feel as if it's a pretty solid unit all around. Jalen Phillips will come back healthy. Bradley Chubb will come back healthy. Not to mention you also brought in guys like Muhammad Kamara and of course Chop Robinson. I'm actually higher on Mo Kamara than I am Chop Robinson, but I think I'm in the minority on that one. Looking at the rest of the defense, the linebacking core with guys like Anthony Walker and David Long Jr. should be fun next year. I don't really know what to expect from it, but we also do have to expect something from Jordan Brooks. Assuming these guys can stay healthy, I do think the front 7 is pretty solid. Then you look into the secondary, and I think there's a lot of good things going on here. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey is the big name piece on this defense, but they also brought in some experienced guys with guys like Kendall Fuller and Jordan Poyer to sort of stir up the defensive back unit. And I think just looking at the overall roster, this is a very solid unit all around, but I think we all kind of expect the same thing from the Miami Dolphins. They will be one of the best teams in the entire NFL the entire season. They will likely win double-digit games next year and be a really dominant team throughout the season. I yet again expect this offense to be maybe a top 5 unit next year, and I do expect this defense to be top 15-ish as well. But my big question really comes to Tua Tagovailoa, who just signed that massive contract. I just don't personally believe that he is a quarterback who can take a team to a championship. I know the stats don't lie, but in some situations they kind of do. I do think that Mike McDaniel is a massive reason as to why Tua has been so successful in the NFL. Now, that's not to discredit Tua Tagovailoa because he has become the master of the system in his own right, so we do have to give him some respect and at least give him that. But I still feel as if that Tua is really not that good of a quarterback when you take him out of the Mike McDaniel system. That's not to say that you can't put Tua on a team like the Houston Texans and he won't find success, because I'm sure he will, but I also feel as if this is a quarterback that is completely reliant on the system working. When that play call doesn't work, I don't think Tua's out there making big time plays with his legs. And what I mean by that is you look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, who are basically notorious for being the best quarterbacks in the league. Well, those are guys who can make plays with their legs. Those are guys who, when the play doesn't work out the way it should, they can go out there and make plays outside of the pocket and throw deep passes and do all these crazy things. Whereas for Tua, I feel as if I never ever see that. Not to mention Tua doesn't have the greatest arm, so it's a really tough issue for the Dolphins to be in because he's been very productive and he's been very proven, but at the same time, we haven't quite seen what we wanted to see from Tua. With that all said though, I do think Miami will still be a solid team. I have them winning somewhere between 9 to 12 games. I think 9 games is like the lowest amount. I think the rest of the AFC has gotten better, so that could potentially hold back a team like Miami. But assuming this team does play up to expectations, I do expect them to reach at least 10 to 12 wins. So again, 9 to 12 wins. I think it's more likely they'll hit the 10 to 12 win mark though. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about the New England Patriots, the team that has the lowest expectations in this division, but they also have kind of high expectations in their own unique way. Last year, the team was absolutely god-awful. They went 4-13 and had a net point differential of negative 130. And in this offseason, they officially went on to a new era of New England Patriots football, moving off of guys like Bill Belichick and Mac Jones. And in this offseason, they obviously got a new head coach and the young quarterback in Drake May. And I feel as if this Patriots team on paper really isn't that bad. I don't think it's a good roster per se, but I think there are certain people who say that this is the worst roster in the league, and I actually think there is some really good players in this team. It just doesn't have a quarterback right now. Drake May is obviously going to be the franchise quarterback, but as of today, we don't know what he's going to be. I don't expect him to start week 1, and I would be generally shocked if he's a starter for more than maybe 4 games this season. In my personal opinion, the team isn't good enough for Drake May to be the quarterback of this team quite yet. I would give it one more full offseason to bring in some more offensive linemen, to bring in some more defensive players, and to bring in a true receiver 1. So when Drake May does enter the football field, he's going out there with a really good roster and a good enough defense to where he can actually try to win games. That's not to say that I don't think he should play at all this season. I think he should. I think he should learn from those, but I don't think he should play a ton. Looking at the roster though, you just paid Ramondre Stevenson. I don't really know how to feel about the contract for Ramondre because a 4-year, $36 million deal seems like a lot for a guy who's only really had like 1 good year of football, but it is the running back position, so I do understand it. Not to mention this team does have a ton of cap space to work with, so this move doesn't necessarily like handicap them in any sort of way. Looking at the rest of the offense, I think the offensive line is a tad bit overrated. I like Jake Andrews, I like Cole Strange, I like Mike Onwenu. I still believe that this offensive line needs some work, but I think it's okay for now. Wide receiving core is very mid, but in kind of a fun way. You have guys like Kendrick Bourne who have obviously shown their abilities to be a really good receiver, but never a true receiver 1. And then there's some other guys like KJ Osborne, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Demario Douglas who are all kind of fighting for that receiver 2 role. And then you have the young guys with guys like Javon Baker, Keyshawn Boutte, and Jalen Polk. My expectations for Jalen Polk is that he will be the receiver 1 for this team this year, maybe receiver 2 if Kendrick Bourne actually plays like he should. I think Polk has talent. I wouldn't have necessarily drafted him when they did draft him, but I also do believe he's going to be a pretty solid player, so I think it's okay. Then defensively speaking, there are some pretty interesting players with guys like Christian Barmore, who had 8.5 sacks last year, Jelani Tavai, Josh Uche, Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones. There's some good pieces here. It's just not a complete unit quite yet. I do think this defense has some solid pieces that they are definitely going to stash moving forward, and they're going to be long-term parts of this team, but it does need a bit of some more talent before I feel confident saying it's a top 20 unit in the NFL. I do think, however, that this defense can be top 20. I just wouldn't say they're top 20 like today, but who knows, maybe they could be if everything does go well. So all in all, I don't expect a whole lot from this New England Patriots team. I think they'll win somewhere between 3 to 5 games next year. I don't expect them to be good, especially if Jacoby Brissett does play the entire season. I know they won 4 games last year, and you can make the case they became a better team, but at the end of the day, every single team in the AFC got better, so it's really hard to say that this Patriots team is going to be better than they were last year when everyone else got better. I think if Drake May sits the entire season, there is a legitimate chance that this team does win 2 games this year, but I do believe in the talent of Drake May, not to mention I think Brissett and guys like Bailey Zappi are talented enough quarterbacks that they could get this team to a couple wins, so I think 2 is pretty unrealistic, but it could happen. Whereas I think a bit more of a realistic number is like 4 to 5 wins for this team. But let's move off of the New England Patriots and now talk about the New York Jets. I will say this and just come straight up upright right here. I do think the Jets are the best team in this division. Now last year they went 7-10 and had a net point differential of negative 87, but I don't think that I take a whole lot from last year. If anything, I think that was a very impressive 7 wins because of how bad Zach Wilson was at quarterback. Now you've sort of figured out a bunch of your issues from last year, your offensive line issues, your receiving core issues, any issues defensively, they've been somewhat addressed. And you're now heading into 2024 with a pretty stacked roster that completely depends on the health of guys like Aaron Rodgers and Tyron Smith. Offensively speaking, we will save Aaron Rodgers for a little bit later because I think that is a fun topic to cover. The weapons have mainly stayed the same with guys like Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Xavier Gibson, Allen Lazard, but you also brought in some interesting players with guys like Mike Williams and the young Malachi Corley. Of all those guys, Garrett Wilson is clearly the best, but I am most excited to see what Malachi Corley can do this upcoming season. I do think there is some young talent there that maybe can be tapped into. I also want to go back to the running back room because I just thought of his name, but Braylon Allen, I am very, 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 very high on him. I think he could be a really good running back. He is super young, coming from Wisconsin, and a massive individual. So for him to be your backup running back to Breece Hall, I wouldn't be shocked if he takes away a couple touchdowns from Breece. Also, shout out to Isaiah Davis. I don't know why they drafted 2 running backs, but they did, so have fun with that. The offensive line is basically revamped. Both your tackles are brand new with guys like Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, and you also brought in some young insurance in case one of those guys does get injured, because I think it's pretty likely that one probably will at some point, in Olu Fashanu. Olu Fashanu was maybe the most talented tackle in the entire class. Not the best, but maybe the most talented one. And now you can have him be your backup, and he can learn from maybe the greatest offensive tackle in recent history in Tyron Smith. Definitely not the greatest, but one of. I should have said that earlier. The interior of the offensive line is not great, but I think if there was to be a weak point, it would probably be the center position, so I think you're still okay. But Elijah Vera Tucker is there. I'm excited to see what he can do in his career. Looking at the defense, it is still just as good this year as it was last year. Plus, you get the addition of Hassan Reddick. Hopefully, he can play at a high level. You're also expecting guys like Will McDonald to take a step forward, as he is a very young player and a very talented player as well. And then looking at the rest of the defense, of course, there's Quincy Williams, CJ Mosley, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Javon Kinlaw, Jermaine Johnson. The list goes on and on and on. This is a fantastic defense. Also, keep an eye out for guys like Quantez Stiggers and Isaiah Oliver. I expect those guys to get some playing time this year. So all in all, again, I do believe this Jets team is good and it should be one of the best teams, but this team is 110% reliant on one man, and that guy is Aaron Rodgers. We all know who he is. He is maybe the most decorated quarterback in the NFL as of today. His longtime career with the Green Bay Packers will go down in history, and at some point he will be a Hall of Famer. But I do think that he still has a lot of good football in him. It just has to show up there on the field. His health is the biggest priority for this New York Jets team. If A-Rod cannot stay healthy, this team will be kept afloat by Tyrod Taylor, but it's not going to be necessarily elevated to a championship team. But assuming that we get a fully healthy Aaron Rodgers, and if we can get like 75% of what Aaron Rodgers typically is, this could be the best team in the AFC East. But lastly, let's talk about the team that was the best team in the AFC East and has been the past couple years, in the Buffalo Bills. Last year, they won the division and had an 11-6 record with a net point differential of 140. And in this offseason, they went through a bit of some changes both offensively and defensively. The biggest departure of this offseason was, of course, Stephon Diggs, who they are replacing with guys like Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir. I will make the case that this receiving core is arguably better than what they had last year, despite not having a better receiver than Stephon Diggs. Khalil Shakir really showed a lot of talent last year, and I think he is being highly slept on, and I think that he's going to be a great player for this team. Then you have a really good receiver 2/3 with Curtis Samuel, who's been kind of utilized the same way throughout his career that I do expect Buffalo to use him. And then Keon Coleman, he is a complete wild card of a man and of a player, but man, if he can make some plays this year, it's going to be a lot of fun. Offensive line wise, it's still a work in progress, but I think it's still a pretty good unit. Deion Dawkins stays at left tackle, Connor McGovern at center, Osiris Torrance gets another year at right guard. I do expect some big things. And a name to keep an eye on this offseason and heading into next year is Cedric Van Pran, the former Georgia center. I think he could play for this team at some point this year. Defensively speaking, you lost a couple of your safeties, you lost your corner, you lost a piece here and there, but for the most part, the whole core of this defense is still here. You still have Ed Oliver, you still have Greg Rousseau, you still have Matt Milano, AJ Epinesa, you still have Rasul Douglas from this year, you have Taylor Rapp, Christian Benford, Taron Johnson, so still think this defense is good, but I think it's pretty clear that they did take a small step back. Anytime you lose some pieces like Tre'Davious White and both your safeties the past couple years, I still kind of think this defense took a step back, but I still feel as if this Buffalo team is still really good. As long as you have Josh Allen and you have the pieces around him, I think this team will be better. I'll say this, I think offensively they got, I would say, significantly better. Now, significantly is a loose term. I wouldn't say it's a significant upgrade, but they got better offensively this offseason, whereas I think the defense took a small step back. So in some ways, anything you lost with the defense, you can can arguably make up with the offense. So similar to like the other teams in this division, I do expect this to be a team that could win a lot of games this year. I think they'll win somewhere between like 10 to 12 wins. Alrighty, so we talked about each individual team. Let's do our full-on brief decision preview. Who do I think is going to win the division? If you're asking me right now, based off everything I've been hearing, the New York Jets. I think last year they went 7-10 with the worst quarterback in the league. I think that is in big credit to that defense. I think that defense is the best in the division and maybe the best in the NFL. And assuming that Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, you have Breece Hall, you have Garrett Wilson, you have a good offensive line. I think that's a pretty complete team all around. Then I think below them is Buffalo. This is a team that very well may be the best team of this division. They could easily win it, and I would not be shocked. They got Josh Allen. I think they got better offensively, worse defensively, but I'm not that worried about it. I think that team is still really awesome. Then I think third is the Miami Dolphins. I wouldn't be shocked if they also won the division. That's sort of the fun thing about this division. There's three teams that are super unique and super fun, but could all win the division. My concern for Miami is what is their ceiling? I feel like we all know what their floor is. It's like a bottom tier playoff team, but what's their ceiling? Can they win a championship? Can they win some playoff games? I don't know quite yet. If I had to guess what their chances of making the playoffs this year, I would probably say it's 50-50. The rest of the division and the rest of the conference is really awesome, so it's really hard to fit Miami into that playoff picture. But you have Tyreek Hill, you got I think better defensively, and you still have some good pieces offensively. I don't know. It's really hard to say. And then, of course, lastly, I can almost guarantee that this is going to happen. This is the only team that I could maybe 100% pinpoint them to be last. It is the Patriots. They are the worst team in this division. They have a good roster. It just does not compare to the rest of the AFC, at least for most of the team. With that being said, though, I'm excited for Drake May. I'm excited for a lot of the pieces to develop. I think this is year 1/2 of the rebuild, heading for Drake May as a future quarterback. So again, my order right now would be the Jets, Bills, Dolphins, Patriots. But again, come week 4, week 5, that list could be completely flipped on its head. But if you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. And I love you guys. Peace.